Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to this session of Healthy Living Together. Healthy Living Together is a program, a project of the McKenzie Health System, and works in collaboration with the Sanilac County Health Department, MSU Extension, Great Start Collaborative Sanilac, and Sanilac County Community Mental Health. I'm Kellie Phelps from Sanilac County Community Mental Health, and we hope through these sessions we can help you on a path to a better life. Just a couple of housekeeping items today. Your audio is automatically muted. Through our session today, please use the Q&A function to communicate a question to our speaker. I'll be monitoring that during our session. Please do not use the chat function. And this event is being recorded. Our agenda today, our speaker, Anna Edie, will be speaking today on listening to more than words. After her presentation, we'll go through your questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Anna. Today, she comes to us with over 20 years of experience in working with children and families. She earned her master's degree from Oakland University and later on went back to school to earn her degree as a BCBA. She currently serves as a supervisor of our autism program here at Sanilac County Community Mental Health. Today, Anna will share with us some words of wisdom and encouragement for parents as they learn to understand and listen to more than words with their children. Thank you for being here, Anna.
Thank you for having me. Hi, as Kellie has said, my name is Anna Edie. I have a master's in counseling and a master's in autism. When I graduated with my master's degree, I was pregnant with my son, and he was soon after diagnosed with autism. So that sent me back to school to get more education so I could help him. I have learned to listen between the lines of words, both professionally and personally, based on my experience. I do not have it down. I am not perfect at it by any means, but I'm going to try to give you as much resources as possible. Communication. Communication is a two-way street. As most of you know, we listen as well as speak. So we're listening for those verbal cues, but we're also listening for nonverbal cues. So what does communication mean? It means something different to you than it does to anybody else, because each person is different. So based on how you were raised, on your other life experiences, whether good, bad, or some trauma, your personality styles, and your learning issues. This is all how you communicate. So what does your style say about you? Are you a talker and you don't listen? Because sometimes some of us tend to talk more than we listen. Or do you listen and rarely talk and rarely have anything to say? Some of us are also straight and to the point. Usually that's me, straight to the point, and not paying attention to those nonverbal cues. So what is nonverbal communication? What does your nonverbal communication say about you and how others approach you? If we think about nonverbal communication, we're thinking about listening through your own experiences. We're thinking about how your posture is, how your tone is. And so we're going to talk a little bit about nonverbal communication because that is an important, vital part of listening. How do you speak to your child? Do you talk to them in a way that is respectful? Would you want them to talk to you the way that you're talking to them? Are you talking to them in a way that fosters their independence and fosters their learning style? And what is your listening like? Are you actually listening? Do you make eye contact with them? Or are you listening through sometimes your own experiences in life? We tend to listen expecting a certain outcome. This also comes down to, how do you hear? Do you hear only so that you can respond? Or do you hear what their needs are and what the expectations? There are so many questions about communication. So I encourage you to use these questions that I have here to reflect as we go into this training. So how do we listen? Nonverbal communication. Does your nonverbal communication encourage or discourage your child to communicate with you? Are you looking at them? Are you not looking at them? Are you rolling your eyes? Are you thinking about how you're going to respond? Many times our body language speaks way louder than our actual words. Our children tend to do what we do and not what we say. I know that's a cliche, but it is very true. So one of the things that we want to talk about, want to work on, is active listening. When we're active listening, we're making eye contact, we're smiling, we're leaning into somebody, and we have the general facial expressions of empathy, understanding, listening. As if we're listening to what they're saying, then our facial expressions will usually reflect what that person is saying, whether it's a child or not. So, and then as children, smaller children, we want to get down to their level, because if we're standing over top of them, we're exerting an authority figure. And yes, at times you will have to exert that authority figure. So here are some examples of some nonverbal communication and body language. So sometimes the ways in we talk, the intonations in our voices, we stress certain words. I use my hands. That's one of them. Our posture. Are we leaning in? Are we slouching? Are we laying back? Appearance. Now, that's not necessarily going to matter with your children because they've seen you however. But when we're communicating with others, sometimes our appearance does come into play. Our head movements. I move my head a lot. I nod a lot. If we're listening to somebody, we're probably nodding if we're in agreement. Or if we're not in agreement, we're shaking our heads. So what are our hand movements? Nonverbal, like we wave to people when we want to say hi. So there are so many different ways that we have nonverbal communication, that not only for this is not only for how you are communicating with your child, but my most important thing that I want to give you out of this is, how are you listening to your child? So are you doing these things when you communicate? But is your child also doing these things? Are you paying attention to their facial expressions when they're communicating with you? Is there body contact? Are they touching you? Do they need your attention? Do they need that physical contact? Some of our kids have a tendency to not understand personal space. And then sounds, sometimes laughing. That's the sound that we make when we're engaged in a conversation. Technically, it's a nonverbal. So all behavior is a form of language. So have you ever considered that behavior is another form of language? We communicate. All behavior is communication. So when we talk about behavior is something that somebody does or says that has an impact on themselves, the world around them. So that's basically anything that somebody does is considered a behavior. So we think about a newborn, an infant that is 0 to 12 months, that is unable to express themselves in words, they do get their needs met. So how do they do that? They cry. They don't go to sleep. They refuse to sleep. They have multiple facial expressions. As they get older and more mobile, even in that first 12 months, they're going to do some hitting. They're going to do some biting. They're going to get their needs met however they can. Although these aren't desired behaviors, some of these aren't desired behaviors, they meet the need. When a baby infant cries, we go and we try to figure out what it is that their need is. What do they want? Are they hungry? Are they wet? Do they have an upset stomach? So it's a guessing game, but their behavior of crying is teaching them, when I cry, I get my need met. So behaviors are all can be nonverbal communication of something, a need of some sort. And this is why we talk about listening and behaviors together, because we're going to listen to those nonverbal things. We're going to listen to that behavior that we see. We all, toddlers, children, adolescents, and adults, are no different. We engage in behaviors to communicate our needs and our wants. Throughout our lifetime, we do these. For example, my child will come home from school and they sit heavily on the couch and they sigh. They're communicating something. They are not saying anything. They're communicating something. So then I have to ask the question of, based on what I just saw, are you having a rough day? Is something wrong? So that I can get more information from them so I can help them. So that's kind of listening to those nonverbals. And if you think back, some of us that are older, and even not older, I guess, is my mom had a look. And when she gave me that look, I stopped whatever I was doing and went the other way and stopped it, because that was her communicating to me that whatever I was doing, thinking, saying, going to do was a no. And so I had to move on. It is vital that we listen to behaviors. Observing what behaviors are that your child is doing is listening to them. We're finding a way to figure out what our child is saying without them really having to say it. And understanding the why of behaviors gives us tools and insights into managing these behaviors. And we can teach more appropriate behaviors, because most of the time when we're listening to behaviors, we have a tendency to hear those negative things. It's just human nature that we hear, we see the negative things. If your child is doing something and you're really happy about what they're doing, the choices they're making, the behavior they're engaging in, they're sharing with their siblings, that's a time that you should give them as much praise and what we call, in my world, in my behavior world, reinforcement. Encouraging that behavior that you want will get more of that behavior that you want. So I'm going to talk a little bit about understanding behaviors and the functions. So the way children develop, the way our brains develop, all people develop, is that the first area of our brain that develops as infants is through behavior. We cry, we get our need met. We cry, we get our need met. Therefore, it's so important for us to ask why. Why behaviors occur? What is the function of the behavior? And when I say what is the function, it's the why. Why is this behavior occurring? And what do I need to do to either change the behavior or keep this behavior going because I like this behavior? So what has caused this behavior? We also want to know, like, if there's something in the environment, or if there's something I'm doing, or there's something somebody else is doing. So we can change those things to make the behavior more appropriate. Once we know why, we can choose a replacement behavior. And I'll get more into that. If it's a problem behavior, what I would rather see them doing. That's what I'm looking for. This is, if they're hitting, I would obviously rather them not hit, but what is the replacement of behavior? It's not just a no, don't do that. It's our hands are for high fives. Let's use your words. What is it you need? Because usually hitting is a form of attention getting behavior or escape, depending. So what are the functions? And in my world of behavior analysts, we have we have 4 functions, even though I'm pretty sure there's more. The 4 is the main ones that we deal with. So when we ask what are the functions of behavior, we put them into 4 categories. We put them into attention, where the individual wants some attention from you, from somebody else. Escape, they're trying to get away from something or get out of something, or get away from someone. Tangibles, they want something physical. They want something, toys, money, food. And then sensory. So that's that internal things that are going on. They're hot, they're cold, they're hungry, they're sick, or they have a sensory need that they're going to meet. They need to meet. So I have a video, and I'm hoping that it works. And this is a video of attention-seeking behavior. It did not share, did it?
No, would you like me to try it from this end?
Sure.
Stop sharing for just a moment.
Sure. Oh, I can do a new share. Hold on.
Okay,
Let's see.
there you go.
There we go. Okay. So this is a boy throwing a temper tantrum, and it's attention-seeking behavior. As you watch the little boy, he is trying to make sure he is in line of sight of his parent that is there, and you can see the dog wants nothing to do with it as well. So he goes out of sight, and the baby stops crying a little bit. And the dog is like, no, I don't want anything to do with this either. All right. So that is an example of attention-seeking behavior. Obviously, that is really obvious that that little boy wanted attention. And when he didn't have eye contact, he wasn't screaming and crying, but he was looking for his, I believe it was his dad, looking for his dad. So what do we do? I'm going to go through the 4 different functions, and I'm going to tell you like what it is and what some things that we can do to mitigate attention seeking, all these functions of behavior, and so that you're listening to your child when they are doing these things. So attention seeking behavior is when they're engaging in a challenging behavior to get attention from adults and peers, and this is not always positive. In fact, it is usually not positive. It's usually negative because we tend to give more attention when there is a negative behavior. So when a child is doing something we don't like, they're hitting, they're biting, they're kicking, we are going to jump and they're going to get that attention right away. And that teaches that child that they're going to get attention. So they're going to keep doing that behavior. An example would be that a child throws the food on the floor at dinner time while you're busy talking. When you turn, you tell them to stop. Well, they just learned that they get attention by throwing food. Now, you obviously don't want your child to be throwing food. So what do? What are some things you can do in that situation, even with a toddler throwing a fit? If you have an older child, you can say, if you would like my attention, you can use your words. And then when they do use their words, you give them attention. One thing we want to make sure is that we don't give attention to the problem behavior. So obviously, that video of the toddler, they weren't giving attention to his tantrum. They were walking away from him. They didn't not give attention to him. Like, it wasn't a safety risk, because if it's a safety risk, you definitely need to give attention, because we don't need safety problems. But we can tell them the expectations, such as the throwing of the food on the floor, is we can say, our food stays on our plate. Are you all done eating? You can ask them, what do they want? But we don't give attention for the throwing of food on the floor. Like, instead of saying stop, you would say, our food stays on our plate. What do you need? Or you can use your words. And then I would, as a behavior analyst, I would make them pick up the food once they were done eating, because that's following through. So with escape, what do we do with escape? So children engage in challenging behaviors to escape. They're getting away from, they're avoiding a situation, a demand, a person. A perfect example, and I did have a video, but I couldn't get it to quite work, was that a child cries and screams when they're told it's bedtime. I experienced this as a parent. I'm pretty sure I don't know any parent that has not experienced frustrations at bedtime. So what happens is they scream and they cry when they're told it's bedtime, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll give you 10 more minutes, because you don't want to deal with that in the moment. But then 10 more minutes turns into another 10 minutes. So it might sound kind of harsh, but we want to teach them boundaries. Escape behavior or replacement behavior is actually teaching them boundaries. So they have possibly just learned that by screaming and crying, they don't have to do something. So this will go into, just like attention, it'll go into other behaviors. So if they don't want to do not just bedtime, but they don't want to do bath time, or they don't want to do math, they're going to scream and cry to try to get out of it. So what do? We follow through. When we say it's bedtime, it's bedtime. You can be understanding and tell them, you understand. This is where listening comes in. I understand that you do not like bedtime. You feel like you're going to miss something, but you're not missing anything, because mom and dad are going to bed too. So telling them you understand, and then giving them choices, such as maybe on the weekends, they're allowed to stay up a little later. So say we go to bed at this time on the school night, and then we can earn staying up later on the weekends. But if we don't go to bed now, then we won't be able to earn extra time on the weekends. So we follow through. That is the main thing about escape, is you follow through. Depending as well. Sometimes escape is a good thing, whereas maybe somebody isn't a safe person and our child throws a challenging, like a behavior, because they have to go to somebody's house that they're really uncomfortable with. Being able to have that conversation with them about what it is that they're uncomfortable with is vital, and not just going, well, you're just going anyways, because we do need to follow through, but there are times where following through isn't always the safest choice. So we have to take into consideration what the demand is. And when I say demand, I mean what happened right before. So right before your child threw the temper tantrum, we're going to call it that, you had said, we're going to so-and-so's house, and they start to throw a temper tantrum. That might be a good time to sit down with them and say, okay, why do you not want to go there? If they can talk, why do you not want to go there? What would you like to do instead? Not that it's always an option, but maybe that will give you some clues on to what is going on of why they don't like to be around certain people. So next is tangible. So they engage in challenging behavior because they want access to something. Child wants a toy that another child has, and this kid goes up and hits the other kid. And that kid drops the toy, screaming and crying. So the kid gets the toy that he wants. They have just learned that when I want something and I hit, I get it. Or I bite and I get it. I know this happens a lot in daycare because we hear it all the time here in my program about kids biting and hitting. So what do we do? Well, obviously, if it's a safety risk and they can't have access to it, then we have to teach them that no is an answer. Like, unfortunately, you can't have that. But we want to teach a replacement behavior. So when a child wants a toy from another child, we teach them to ask. We teach them to wait their turn. And we have to have them use their words to get what they want, because they might not get it right away. But when they do use their words, when they haven't learned this behavior, when they haven't learned how to use their words to ask for something that they want, when they do start to use their words, for this to be a replacement behavior, for them to learn that, you have to give them what they are asking for, if they can have it right away, because it's 30 seconds where you have then lost that ability for that child to connect that question, that ask, to that item. It's a very short window, but so tangibles are things that they want. And sometimes we have to teach them to wait, but you can give them choices. I love choices. You can have this or this, and not even say, no, you can't have the tablet, but you can have this toy or this toy. Instead of saying, no, you can't have the tablet, you can tell them what they can have. So that's what a lot of replacement behavior is teaching them what they can have or what they can do. So if you have a child that likes to climb up on the table, and teaching them replacement behavior is saying, our feet stay on the floor. Because a lot of times our kids, we expect them to know what the expectation is, and in reality, they only know that we're telling them they can't do this. They don't know what that other expectation is, that other behavior. So telling them what you want them to do is a vital skill for them to learn. And then that leads us to sensory. When children engage in sensory behaviors, it's naturally reinforcing, so it feels good. So in the very beginning, I said sensory was being hot, being cold, being hungry. But sometimes sensory behavior is a sensation that we like, how it feels. Rocking. Some people rock because they like how it feels, and it regulates their nervous system. Some of us nail bite. We do that. Sometimes it's because we're nervous, and sometimes it's because we feel the need to, and we're not exactly sure why. Some kids flap their hands, some adults flap their hands when they get excited. Sometimes head hitting. These are sensory behaviors, and we're not exactly clear on the function of them. So you can't say this happened because they weren't allowed to have a toy, because sometimes these behaviors happen when there is nothing that had happened right before. They're just sitting there, and all of a sudden they start rocking or start hand clapping or start hitting their head. So the function isn't clear and it's internally motivated. We all have. When I get stressed, there are certain things that will help me calm down. And it's internally motivated. Nobody knows the function of it, but I do, because I have the wherewithal to understand stress, whereas children don't. So when I say it's internally motivated and maintained, meaning that it's going to happen no matter what you do. So again, we go back to what can we do? Well, we try to teach a replacement behavior if there is one. If there's one that's equal, that will equally provide that sensory input. These are the hardest to replace. And the question is, does it really interfere? So if you have a child that's doing this, when they get excited, is it interfering? Is it becoming a problem? Or is it just look funny? Because it doesn't matter if it looks funny. Now, head-hitting, that's a safety issue. So we would try to teach a replacement behavior. We would teach blocking. Kids put things in their mouths. That's a sensory issue. They're putting everything in their mouths. So a replacement behavior would be providing them with something that they can put in their mouth, providing them with food and saying food goes in your mouth. Or we have a lot of chewies in my department because we have a lot of kids that have oral sensory issues and they want to chew on everything. So we have these little necklaces that they can chew on and it helps them. If you think about a baby that's teething, they automatically put everything in their mouth. So giving them the correct thing to put in their mouth. So behavior as reflection. So a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this as a parent, I feel like sometimes my child's behavior is a reflection of my parenting abilities. And yes, kids do imitate parents, but children's behavior is not necessarily a reflection of your lack of ability or your great ability. Sometimes it's just behavior. They're communicating something. So let's reframe this. If you reinforce a function of the behavior, so if you give attention to attention, if you give escape to escape, if you give tangibles to a tangible and sensory to sensory, that behavior will occur over and over and over again. So if you want to change a behavior, you want to change your child's behavior, no matter how old your child is, you have to change what you do. You have to change how you react. So when I'm talking about listening, we're listening for these behaviors. We're listening to what is really going on with our children. Because children are going to have behaviors, but how we respond will either increase or decrease. Are we having an emotional response? Or are we responding in a way that is going to teach our child? And yes, we're all human and we all make mistakes. And the best thing to do when you have had an emotional reaction is come back to your child, no matter what their age is, and say, you know what? I reacted wrong to that. And this is how I should have reacted. So can we work through this? Because now you're teaching your child how to work through a situation that's uncomfortable. Parenting is the hardest job on the planet. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you do not get paid enough at all because there is no formal training. There's no manuals with our children. There's so many different scenarios that we cannot prepare for that it's just a guessing game sometimes. And I've said to my son, I'm doing the best I can with what I know, and hopefully it's good enough. But we can help our children regulate to learn what is important because that will teach them as an adult to regulate. So we have to take care of ourselves. And some of taking care of ourselves is recognizing when we are reacting in a certain way that reinforces a behavior. So sometimes we give in because it's the easiest way to get that behavior to stop. But the problem becomes you're teaching your child to continue that behavior, and it's just going to get worse. And as hard as it is in the moment, to choose not to reinforce that behavior, in the long run, you will be better off and your child will be better off because they'll be able to self-regulate better. So I often say, if you're questioning if you're a good parent, then you probably are. So I thank you for your time, and hopefully I have given you a lot of things to think about. And if you have any questions, I am here for questions.
Right. Thank you, Anna. You really did answer, at least in part, one of the questions that came up, and that is, what if I make a mistake as a parent, or I don't know what to do in that moment to offer the correct behavior, or, to correct what's happening, and I end up giving in to the pressure. Like when we're in a grocery store, um, and the child is just insistent on one particular item, and it just snowballs into a complete meltdown. What can I do?
Well, like I had said, one of the things that we do is we make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. If you think back to your parents, I'm pretty sure every single parent made a mistake. There is no such thing. Just because there's no manual, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. So as long as we're learning from our mistakes, going, okay, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. The store example is a big one. I've had to do this with my child, is when they're throwing a fit. I've had to leave a full cart of food in the grocery store and take him and leave.
Oh,
Because otherwise otherwise I was going to give in. So I kind of had to do what was best for me in the moment, and that was leave that store. Was it frustrating? It was so frustrating to have to leave. I remember vividly, I had just done all of my grocery shopping. I was at the checkout, and he started to throw himself on the floor and scream and cry, and he was kicking. And he has autism, so it was intensified by 1,000%. And I scooped him up and we left. And I left that cart right there. I felt bad, but he also did not throw a fit in the store after that because he knew we would just leave and he would get nothing.
yes. Yeah. So sometimes we have to do the hard thing, so later on it's a little
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions, so we'll wrap this up. It's a very interesting discussion. Thanks again for being here. And just a reminder to all of our participants, Healthy Living Together is scheduled each month on the third Wednesday of the month. Our next session will be on May 15th on Zoom at 12 p.m. And the subject is digital safety, what parents need to know. Our speaker will be Matthew Jezequel. He's an officer with the Sandusky Police Department, and I've heard him several times. He is amazing, so don't miss that. Thank you
Thank
again,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.